This audiobook is not here to comfort you. It is not here to tell you everything will be fine. It is not here to help you relax. This audiobook is here to train you. To train your mind to function when everything around you is falling apart. To train your nervous system to hold steady when every signal is telling you to panic. To train you to become the person who thinks clearly when no one else can. That is not a small thing. That is the difference between people who lead and people who get swept away. Let me be direct with you. Most people do not lose because they lack talent. They do not lose because they are unintelligent. They do not lose because they do not care. Most people lose because in the moments that matter most, their mind betrays them. Pressure hits. Chaos arrives. And instead of thinking, they react. Instead of choosing, they panic. Instead of leading, they freeze or explode. And by the time the moment passes, the damage is already done. You have felt this. You know exactly what it looks like. A crisis hits at work and suddenly your chest tightens, your thoughts scatter, and you say something you spend the next 3 days regretting. A confrontation escalates, and instead of staying composed, you match the other person's energy and lose your position. A deadline collapses, a plan falls apart, an unexpected problem lands on your desk, and your brain goes blank right when you need it most. This is not weakness. This is an untrained response. There is a critical difference. Weakness implies you cannot change it. An untrained response means you simply have not built the system yet. And that is exactly what this audiobook will help you build. Life does not test you when things are easy. Anyone can appear calm on a quiet afternoon. Anyone can sound composed when nothing is at stake. Life tests you in the moments when everything is at stake. When the pressure is real. When the consequences are immediate. When the room is loud and the clock is ticking and everyone around you is losing their grip. That is the test. Not what you do on your best day. What you do on your worst. This audiobook is for you if you have ever walked out of a meeting and thought, "Why did I react like that?" It is for you if you have ever lost your composure during a conversation that did not need to become an argument. It is for you if you have ever frozen during a presentation when someone challenged you and you could not find the words. It is for you if you have ever watched someone else stay perfectly calm in a high-pressure situation and wondered how they do it. It is for you if you are tired of being hijacked by your own stress response. And let me be clear about what this training is. It is not positive thinking. It is not repeating affirmations in front of a mirror. It is not pretending everything is fine when it is not. This is operational training for your mind. The same way a surgeon trains to stay steady with a scalpel when things go wrong in the operating room. The same way a pilot trains to follow protocol when alarms are going off in the cockpit. You are going to train your mind to stay functional, clear, and controlled when your environment is doing everything it can to pull you into chaos. Calm is not a personality trait. Calm is a skill. And like every skill, it can be developed, sharpened, and made automatic through deliberate practice. Here is what you will learn across the 8 chapters of this audiobook. In Chapter 1, you will understand why you panic. Not the surface-level explanation, but the actual mechanism inside your nervous system that takes over your thinking brain and puts your body into survival mode. When you understand the machinery, you stop being a victim of it. In Chapter 2, you will learn how to rewire your default response. Your current reaction to pressure was not chosen. It was built by years of unconscious repetition. You will learn how to interrupt that pattern and install a new one. In Chapter 3, you will train yourself to stay still when others run. Stillness under pressure is not passivity. It is the highest form of control. You will learn why the person who does not move first often wins. In Chapter 4, you will learn how to make decisions under fire. Pressure distorts thinking. It narrows your focus, accelerates your timeline, and tricks you into choosing speed over clarity. You will learn the framework that prevents this. In Chapter 5, you will build what I call an unshakable core. This is the internal foundation that keeps you grounded regardless of what is happening externally. Without this core, every technique is temporary. In Chapter 6, you will learn to turn pressure into clarity. Most people see pressure as a threat. Trained minds see it as a filter that burns away distractions and reveals what actually matters. In Chapter 7, you will learn how to lead when no one else can. Crisis exposes leadership. When everyone panics, The person who stays calm becomes the anchor. You will learn how to be that person, not by force, but by composure. In Chapter 8, you will make calm your identity. This is the final shift. You will move from someone who tries to act calm to someone who is calm, not as a performance, as a permanent way of operating. Now, a word about how to use this audiobook. Do not listen passively. This is not background noise for your commute. Every chapter contains principles that require active engagement. When you hear a concept, apply it mentally. When you hear a contrast between a reactive mind and a calm mind, ask yourself honestly which one you have been operating from. When you hear a practical instruction, commit to testing it within the next 24 hours. You will also notice repetition throughout this audiobook. That is intentional. I will repeat core principles in different contexts and from different angles. This is not filler. This is training methodology. A concept you hear once is interesting. A concept you hear 10 times in 10 different situations becomes automatic. Repetition is not a sign that you missed something. Repetition is how your nervous system learns. By the time you finish this audiobook, you will not be a different person. You will be a more controlled version of yourself. A version that does not get hijacked by panic. A version that does not make decisions from fear. A version that other people look to when things fall apart. Because you are the one still thinking, still choosing, still calm. That is the promise. Not transformation into someone you are not. Training into someone you are capable of becoming. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Understand why you panic. Panic is not a character flaw. It is a system response. And until you understand the system, you will keep being controlled by it. Most people think they panic because they are weak. They think calm people are born that way and anxious people are stuck that way. That belief is not only wrong, it is dangerous. Because as long as you believe panic is who you are, you will never learn to override it. You will accept it as a permanent feature instead of treating it as a trainable response. This chapter is going to change that. Not with motivation, with mechanism. You are going to understand exactly what happens inside your body and brain when pressure arrives. And once you see the machinery, you will never look at your own panic the same way again. Here is what happens when a threat appears. It does not matter if the threat is physical or psychological. It does not matter if it is a car accident or a difficult email from your boss. Your brain processes both through the same system. The moment your brain detects danger, a small structure deep inside called the amygdala activates. The amygdala does not think. It does not reason. It does not weigh pros and cons. It reacts. Its only job is survival, and it does that job fast. When the amygdala fires, it sends an immediate signal to your body. Your heart rate increases. Your breathing becomes shallow and rapid. Your muscles tense. Blood flow redirects away from your digestive system and toward your limbs. Your palms sweat. Your vision narrows. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for logic, planning, and clear thinking, gets partially shut down. This is the fight or flight response. Your body is preparing to survive a physical threat. The problem is obvious. Most of the threats you face today are not physical. Nobody is chasing you with a weapon. Nobody is attacking you in a conference room. But your nervous system does not know the difference. A missed deadline activates the same survival circuitry as a predator in the wild. A hostile question in a meeting triggers the same cascade as a physical confrontation. Your body responds to social and professional pressure the same way it responds to life-threatening danger. This is not a design flaw. This system kept your ancestors alive. But in a modern environment, it creates a massive problem. You are walking into boardrooms, negotiations, and difficult conversations with a nervous system that is wired for a jungle. And when that system takes over, your thinking brain goes offline right when you need it most. This is what most people get wrong. They believe they made a bad decision under pressure because they are not smart enough. They believe they froze in a confrontation because they are not brave enough. They believe they lost their composure because they are not strong enough. None of that is true. They lost access to their thinking brain because their survival brain took over. That is not a character problem. That is a wiring problem. And wiring can be changed. Let me show you what this looks like in real time. A reactive mind receives a piece of bad news. Instantly, the chest tightens. The jaw clenches. Thoughts start racing, but none of them are useful. The reactive mind does not pause. It does not assess. It grabs the first available response, which is almost always emotional, and acts on it. It fires off an angry email. It says something defensive. It shuts down completely. And 5 minutes later, when the amygdala calms down and the prefrontal cortex comes back online, the reactive mind looks at what it just did and thinks, "Why did I do that?" A calm mind receives the same piece of bad news. The same amygdala activation begins. The same surge of cortisol starts moving through the body. But here is where the difference appears. The calm mind has trained a gap between stimulus and response. It recognizes the activation. It does not fight it. It does not pretend it is not happening, but it does not obey it either. The calm mind breathes. It pauses. It lets the first wave of reactivity pass without acting on it. And in that pause, the prefrontal cortex stays engaged. Thinking stays online. The calm mind responds instead of reacting, not because it feels less, because it has trained a different sequence. That gap, that pause between the trigger and the response, is everything. That pause is not natural. It is built. It is the single most important skill you will develop through this audiobook. Every technique, every principle, every chapter builds on this one idea. Create the gap. Protect the gap. Widen the gap. Most people operate without a gap. Stimulus comes in, reaction goes out. It is instant. It is automatic. It is unconscious. They are living on autopilot, controlled by a system that was designed for survival, not for performance. And they wonder why they keep making the same mistakes under pressure. They wonder why they keep saying things they regret. They wonder why they cannot stay calm when it matters. The answer is simple. They have never trained the pause. Now here is something critical you need to understand. Your current panic response is not random. It was built. Every time you reacted to pressure without pausing, you reinforced that neural pathway. Every time stress arrived, and you let your body's automatic response drive your behavior, you strengthened the pattern. Your nervous system learned, through repetition, that pressure means react. That urgency means rush. That discomfort means escape. You train this, not deliberately, not consciously, but through thousands of small moments where you let the reactive pattern run unchecked. You built a default response that now fires automatically. This is how the nervous system works. It does not care whether a pattern is good or bad. It only cares how many times the pattern has been repeated. The more you repeat a response, the more automatic it becomes. The more automatic it becomes, the less conscious choice you have in the moment. This is why telling yourself to just calm down does not work. You are trying to override a deeply wired automatic response with a conscious thought. That is like trying to stop a freight train by standing in front of it. The conscious mind is slower than the automatic response. By the time you think, "I should stay calm," the amygdala has already fired, the cortisol is already flowing, and your body is already in survival mode. You do not beat panic by fighting it in the moment. You beat panic by training a different default before the moment arrives. This is the difference between reaction and preparation. Reactive people try to manage panic when it is already happening. Trained people have already built the system that prevents panic from taking full control. Think of it this way. You do not build physical strength in the middle of a fight. You build strength in the gym, day after day, long before the fight arrives. Mental composure works the same way. You do not build calm in the middle of a crisis. You build calm through repeated practice in low-stakes moments, so that when the high-stakes moment arrives, your trained response activates instead of your survival response. This is not theory. This is how your nervous system actually adapts. Every time you practice pausing before responding, you strengthen the neural pathway for calm. Every time you deliberately slow your breathing when you feel activation rising, you teach your nervous system that activation does not require immediate action. Every time you choose response over reaction in a small moment, you make it slightly easier to do the same in a big moment. That is compounding. That is training. A trained mind does not eliminate the stress response. That is impossible, and it would actually be dangerous. The stress response exists for a reason. A trained mind changes its relationship with the stress response. It feels the activation and does not obey it blindly. It notices the urgency and does not surrender to it. It experiences the discomfort and does not let the discomfort make the decision. That distinction is critical. Calm is not the absence of stress. Calm is the ability to function inside stress without being controlled by it. Most people believe calm means feeling nothing. That is numbness, not calm. True calm is feeling everything and still choosing your response deliberately. I am someone who understands my own system. That is the first identity shift. When you understand why your body does what it does under pressure, you stop blaming yourself. You stop calling yourself weak. You stop believing that panic is a permanent part of who you are. And you start treating calm as what it actually is. A skill. A trainable, repeatable, buildable skill. You do not need to be born with it. You need to build it. And building it starts with understanding the machinery you are working with. Now you know the system. You know why your body reacts the way it does. You know why your thinking brain goes offline when pressure hits. You know why your current response feels automatic and uncontrollable. And most importantly, you know that it can be changed. Not by willpower alone, by training. In the next chapter, you will learn how to rewire your default response. You will learn the specific process that breaks the old reactive pattern and installs a new one. Understanding the system was the first step. Rebuilding it is the next. Chapter 2. Rewire your default response. Your current response to pressure was not chosen. It was inherited. It was shaped by every unexamined reaction you have ever had. And it will keep running your life until you deliberately replace it. Most people believe their reactions are who they are. They say things like, "That is just how I am under pressure." They say, "I have always had a short fuse." They say, "I cannot help it, I just react." And every time they say it, they reinforce the pattern. They give their default response permission to continue. They treat an automatic habit as if it were a fixed identity. That is the first mistake, and it is the most costly one. Your default response is not your identity. It is your most practiced pattern, nothing more. And anything that was built by repetition can be rebuilt by repetition. That is not optimism. That is neuroscience. Your brain does not care which pattern you feed. It only cares which pattern you repeat. Feed the reactive pattern and it gets stronger. Feed a calm, deliberate pattern and that one gets stronger instead. This chapter is about the rebuild, not theory, process. You are going to learn how to interrupt your current wiring and install a response that serves you instead of sabotaging you. The first thing you need to understand is that your default response has a sequence. It feels instant, but it is not. There are steps inside every reaction, and those steps happen so fast that they appear to be one single event. But they are not. When you slow the sequence down, you find the intervention point. And that intervention point is where everything changes. Here is the sequence. First, a trigger arrives. Something happens in your environment. A comment, a deadline, a piece of bad news, an unexpected change. Second, your body activates. Heart rate increases, breathing changes, muscles tense. This is the amygdala doing its job. Third, an impulse forms. Your brain generates an automatic action. Snap back, defend, attack, withdraw, shut down. Fourth, you act on the impulse. You say the thing. You send the message. You slam the door. You go silent. That is the sequence. Trigger, activation, impulse, action. For steps that feel like one. Most people try to change step 4. They try to control their actions after the impulse has already formed. That is too late. By step 4, the momentum is already moving. The emotional energy has already built. Trying to stop yourself at step 4 is like trying to stop a car after you have already driven off the cliff. You can grip the wheel all you want. Gravity has already taken over. The intervention point is between step 2 and step 3. After the body activates, but before the impulse fully forms. That is the gap from chapter 1. That is where you insert a new instruction. That is where rewiring happens. A reactive mind moves from activation to impulse with no interruption. The body heats up and the mouth opens. The chest tightens and the email gets typed. There is no space between feeling and doing. A trained mind creates space in that exact spot. It feels the activation and instead of letting the impulse auto-generate, it inserts a deliberate pause. Not a long pause. Not a dramatic pause. A functional pause. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. Enough time for the prefrontal cortex to come back online. Enough time to shift from automatic to intentional. That pause is not weakness. That pause is the most disciplined thing you can do under pressure. Now let me show you what the rewiring process actually looks like. It has 3 components and none of them are complicated, but all of them require consistency. The first component is recognition. You have to learn to notice when your body activates. Most people are so disconnected from their physical state that by the time they realize they are stressed, they are already deep into a reaction. Recognition means training yourself to feel the early signals. The first tightening in your chest. The first change in your breathing. The first wave of heat in your face or neck. These are not problems. These are alerts. They are your nervous system telling you that the old pattern is about to launch. A trained mind treats these signals as information, not as commands. The second component is interruption. Once you recognize the activation, you interrupt the automatic sequence. You do this with a physical reset, not a mental one. Your body activated physically, so you reset physically. Slow your breathing. Drop your shoulders. Unclench your jaw. Place your feet flat on the ground. These are not relaxation techniques. These are pattern interrupts. You are sending a counter signal to your nervous system. You are telling your body that this is not a survival situation. You are manually down-regulating the fight or flight response so your thinking brain can stay engaged. The third component is redirection. After you interrupt the old pattern, you redirect toward a deliberate response. This is where you ask yourself one question. Not how do I feel? Not why is this happening to me? One operational question. What is the most effective response right now? Not the most emotional response. Not the fastest response. The most effective one. That single question shifts your brain from reactive processing to strategic processing. It pulls your prefrontal cortex back into the driver's seat. It changes the entire trajectory of the moment. Recognition, interruption, redirection. That is the rewiring sequence. It is simple, but do not confuse simple with easy. The reason most people never rewire their default is not because the process is complicated. It is because the process requires repetition in moments when repetition feels impossible. When your body is activated and your impulse is screaming at you to react, choosing to pause and redirect feels unnatural. It feels slow. It feels like you are losing ground. You are not. You are gaining control. And that control will compound over time. Here is what the untrained version looks like. Someone criticizes your work in a meeting. Your body activates. Heat rises. Your jaw tightens. The impulse forms instantly. Defend yourself. Explain why they are wrong. Push back hard. You act on it. Your voice gets tight. Your words get sharp. And you spend the next hour replaying the exchange and wishing you had handled it differently. Here is what the trained version looks like. Same meeting. Same criticism. Same activation. Your body heats up. Your jaw starts to clench. But this time, you notice it. You recognize the activation. You take one slow breath. You drop your shoulders. You unclench your hands under the table. The impulse is still there. It is whispering at you to defend, to push back, to prove them wrong. But you do not obey it. You ask yourself the operational question. What is the most effective response right now? And from that place of clarity, you respond. Measured, controlled, strategic. The room notices. Not because you performed calm, because you operated from calm. That distinction matters. Performing calm is exhausting and unsustainable. Operating from calm is efficient and repeatable. Now here is where most people fail. They try this once, it feels awkward, and they quit. They expect rewiring to feel natural immediately. It will not. Your old pattern has been repeated thousands of times. Your new pattern is brand new. Of course it feels uncomfortable. Of course it feels forced. That discomfort is not a sign that it is not working. That discomfort is the exact sensation of neural pathways being rewritten. The awkwardness is the evidence of change. Most people quit at the point of discomfort. Trained minds push through it. Not because they enjoy discomfort, because they understand that discomfort is temporary and the pattern they are building is permanent. You do not rewire your default in one dramatic moment. You rewire it in dozens of small, unglamorous repetitions. In traffic, when someone cuts you off and you choose not to react. In a conversation when someone says something irritating and you pause before responding. In an email chain when the tone escalates and you deliberately lower yours instead of matching it. These moments do not feel significant, but they are the repetitions that build your new default. Every time you choose the trained response over the automatic one, the new pathway gets stronger and the old one gets weaker. That is how rewiring works. Not through insight alone, through repeated action, not in crisis moments. In everyday moments that prepare you for crisis. A trained mind says, I feel the activation, but I do not have to act on it. That is the new default. Not suppression, not denial. Conscious override. You feel everything. You act on what serves you. I am someone who chooses my response. Not because it is easy, because I have practiced it enough that it is becoming automatic. That identity does not arrive overnight. It arrives through consistency. One pause at a time. One deliberate breath at a time. One redirected impulse at a time. And over weeks and months, the person who used to react without thinking becomes the person who responds with precision. That is the rewire. That is the rebuild. And it is already available to you. Not tomorrow. Right now. The next time you feel activation rising, you have a choice. Run the old pattern or practice the new one. Every repetition counts. Every small moment matters. Every conscious pause rewires the system a little more. In the next chapter, you will learn why staying still when everyone around you is running is not passivity, but the ultimate strategic advantage. You have the mechanism. You have the rewiring process. Now you need the discipline to hold your ground when the world is pulling you to move. Chapter 3. Stay still when others run. Stillness is not inaction. Stillness is the most aggressive form of control you can exercise when everything around you is moving too fast. Most people misunderstand stillness. They think staying still means doing nothing. They think it means freezing. They think it means you do not care or you do not know what to do. That misunderstanding costs them everything. Because in moments of chaos, the person who moves first almost never wins. The person who moves right wins. And moving right requires a moment of stillness that most people are too panicked to take. Watch what happens in any crisis. The moment pressure hits, people start moving. They start talking. They start reacting. They start grabbing at the first solution that comes to mind, whether it is good or not. Speed becomes the priority. Not accuracy. Not clarity. Speed. And that speed creates a cascade of errors that makes the original problem worse. Reactive minds move because movement feels productive. It feels like they are doing something. It feels like they are in control. But activity is not the same as effectiveness. Busyness is not the same as progress. Running in the wrong direction is worse than standing still for 3 seconds and choosing the right one. This is where trained minds separate from the crowd. A trained mind does not resist the urge to move because it feels nothing. It resists the urge to move because it knows that the first 3 seconds of any crisis are the most dangerous. Those are the seconds when the amygdala is loudest, the prefrontal cortex is weakest, and the impulse to do something, anything, is at its peak. A trained mind knows that surviving those 3 seconds without reacting is the difference between a controlled response and an expensive mistake. 3 seconds. That is the window. Not 3 minutes. Not 3 hours. 3 seconds of deliberate stillness can change the entire outcome of a high-pressure situation. Here is why stillness works on a neurological level. When your body enters fight or flight mode, your nervous system accelerates everything. Heart rate goes up. Breathing speeds up. Thoughts race. Your brain shifts into survival processing, which is fast but narrow. It focuses on the threat and ignores everything else. This is called cognitive tunneling. Your field of awareness shrinks to a single point, and you lose access to context, nuance, and long-term thinking. Stillness reverses this process. When you deliberately slow your body, your nervous system receives a conflicting signal. The amygdala is saying speed up, but your deliberate breathing and physical stillness are saying slow down. This conflict forces the brain to reassess. It opens a window for the prefrontal cortex to re-engage. Cognitive tunneling begins to release. Your awareness expands. You start seeing options you could not see 3 seconds ago. This is not a metaphor. This is how your nervous system processes competing signals. Stillness is not passive. Stillness is an active override of the panic signal. It takes more discipline to stay still under pressure than it does to move. Moving is easy. Moving is automatic. Stillness is a choice that goes against every instinct in your body. Most people cannot tolerate the discomfort of stillness. When pressure hits, the internal noise becomes unbearable. Every fiber of their being is screaming, "Do something. Fix it. Respond. Move. Now." And because that discomfort is so intense, they obey it. They react just to make the feeling stop. Not because the reaction is smart, because the silence was too uncomfortable to endure. A trained mind endures the silence, not because it enjoys discomfort, because it knows the discomfort is temporary and the consequences of a premature reaction are not. 3 seconds of discomfort versus 3 months of cleaning up a bad decision. That math is simple, but only a trained mind can do it in real time. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. A reactive mind receives unexpected bad news in a meeting. Within 1 second, the mouth opens. Words start coming out before the brain has processed the information. The tone is defensive or aggressive or panicked. The body language shifts. Everyone in the room sees it. The reactive person has now set a tone for the entire conversation that will be difficult to reverse. They have shown their cards. They have revealed their emotional state. And the people watching, consciously or not, have already made a judgment about that person's composure and competence. A calm mind receives the same news. The same internal activation begins. The heat, the tension, the impulse to speak. But the calm mind does something radical. Nothing. It stays still. It takes 1 breath. It lets the first wave pass. The face remains neutral. The body remains composed. The silence lasts 2, maybe 3 seconds. And in that silence, something powerful happens. The brain catches up. The thinking comes back online. And when the calm mind finally speaks, the words are chosen, not thrown. The tone is measured, not reactive. The room notices. They may not know why, but they feel it. That person is in control. That person is safe to follow. That person can handle this. Stillness communicates more than words ever could. When you stay still while others panic, you send a signal that is impossible to fake. You signal that you are not afraid. You signal that you have capacity to handle what is happening. You signal that the situation is manageable because you are managing yourself. People do not follow the loudest person in a crisis. They follow the stillest one. This applies far beyond the boardroom. In arguments, the person who pauses before responding controls the direction of the conversation. In negotiations, the person who can sit in uncomfortable silence longest holds the power. In high-stakes conversations, the person who does not rush to fill every gap with words is the person who commands the most respect. Silence is not empty. Silence is full of control. Now here is the part most people resist. Practicing stillness feels like losing at first. When everyone around you is moving fast and you are standing still, it feels like you are falling behind. When someone provokes you and you do not respond immediately, it feels like you are losing the exchange. When a crisis lands and you take a breath before acting, it feels like precious time is being wasted. That feeling is a lie. It is the old wiring trying to pull you back to the reactive default. Your nervous system has been trained to equate speed with safety. It has been conditioned to believe that the fastest response is the best response. That conditioning served your ancestors when the threat was a predator and the only options were fight or flee. But in a modern environment, speed without clarity is reckless. The fastest decision is almost never the best decision under pressure. Trained minds know this. That is why they are willing to look slow in the moment to be right in the outcome. They trade the appearance of control for actual control. Reactive people trade actual control for the appearance of doing something. Relief versus respect. That is the real trade. Reactive people react to get relief. The discomfort of the moment is too much, so they act to discharge the tension. It works in the short term. The email is sent. The words are said. The tension is released. But the relief is temporary and the damage is lasting. Trained people endure the discomfort to earn respect. They hold their position. They stay still. They wait until the right response becomes clear. The discomfort lasts a few seconds longer, but the outcome lasts indefinitely. You do not build this capacity by reading about it. You build it by practicing it in small, everyday moments. The next time your phone buzzes with a message that triggers irritation, do not pick it up immediately. Wait 10 seconds. Notice the pull. Feel the urgency to check and respond. And let it pass. The next time someone says something in a conversation that makes your jaw tighten, do not speak first. Let a beat of silence exist. Feel the discomfort of not reacting. And choose your words from that silence. The next time a situation escalates and everyone around you starts moving faster, deliberately slow down. Slower movements, slower speech, slower decisions. Not because you are indifferent, because you are in control. These small practices are not trivial. They are the repetitions that build the stillness reflex. Every time you practice being still when your body wants to move, you weaken the reactive pathway and strengthen the deliberate one. That is compounding discipline. It does not look impressive in any single moment, but over weeks and months, it builds a person who is fundamentally different under pressure. I am someone who stays still when others run. That is not a slogan. That is an operational identity. It means that when the room heats up, you cool down. When the pace accelerates, you decelerate. When everyone else is making noise, you are making assessments. That identity does not make you passive. It makes you dangerous. Because the person who can stay still in chaos is the person who sees what everyone else misses. Stillness is not the absence of power. Stillness is power held in reserve, waiting for the right moment to deploy. And that restraint, that ability to hold your fire when every impulse tells you to shoot, is the mark of a truly trained mind. In the next chapter, you will learn how to make decisions under fire. Staying still gives you the space, but space alone is not enough. You need a framework for choosing the right action when pressure is compressing your time and clarity. That framework is coming next. Chapter 4. Make decisions under fire. The ability to stay still means nothing if you cannot decide what to do next. Stillness gives you the space. This chapter gives you the framework to use that space wisely. Most people make their worst decisions when the stakes are highest. Not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack experience, because pressure distorts the decision-making process in ways they do not recognize until the damage is done. They feel urgency and mistake it for clarity. They feel fear and interpret it as information. They feel the weight of the moment and let that weight crush the very thinking they need most. Pressure does not improve decisions. Pressure compresses them. It shrinks your timeline, narrows your options, and convinces you that you must act now or lose everything. That compression is the enemy, not the problem in front of you, not the crisis itself. The compression of your thinking is what turns a manageable situation into a disaster. And the only way to fight compression is with a deliberate process that forces expansion when everything around you is contracting. Here is what happens inside your brain when you are forced to decide under pressure. Cortisol floods your system. Your amygdala is already active, pushing you toward the fastest available option. Your prefrontal cortex, which normally evaluates consequences, weighs trade-offs, and considers long-term impact, is running at reduced capacity. Your working memory shrinks. You can hold fewer variables in your head at once, and your brain, desperate for resolution, starts gravitating toward whatever decision will end the discomfort fastest. This is why reactive people make fast decisions that feel right in the moment but look terrible in hindsight. They were not choosing the best option. They were choosing the option that provided the quickest relief from the pressure. Speed over accuracy, comfort over consequence. That is the reactive decision-making pattern, and it ruins careers, relationships, and reputations every single day. A trained mind operates from a completely different framework, not a slower one, a more structured one. There is a difference between taking a long time to decide and taking the right amount of time. A trained mind does not delay for the sake of delay. It inserts structure into the gap between stimulus and response. That structure prevents the brain from defaulting to its survival shortcuts. The framework is built on 3 questions, not 10, not 20, 3. Because under pressure, complexity fails. Your cognitive load is already high. Your working memory is already strained. The last thing you need is a complicated model. You need 3 questions that cut through noise and force clarity. Question 1. What is actually happening right now? Not what you fear is happening. Not what might happen tomorrow. Not the worst-case scenario your amygdala is projecting. What is the verifiable reality of this moment? This question forces your brain out of projection mode and into assessment mode. Reactive minds skip this step entirely. They respond to what they think is happening, which is almost always a distorted version of reality amplified by stress. A trained mind separates fact from fear before making any move. Most of the time, when you strip away the emotional amplification, the actual situation is smaller and more manageable than it felt 30 seconds ago. Question 2. What is the most important thing right now? Not the most urgent thing. The most important thing. Pressure constantly tricks you into confusing urgency with importance. Everything feels urgent when your cortisol is elevated. The email feels urgent. The phone call feels urgent. The response feels urgent. But urgency is a feeling, not a fact. Importance is determined by consequences, not by emotional intensity. A trained mind asks this question to filter the noise. In any crisis, there are 10 things screaming for your attention, but only 1 or 2 that will actually determine the outcome. Find those. Ignore the rest. That is decision-making under fire. Not doing everything at once. Doing the right thing first. Question 3. What will I wish I had done when this is over? This question is the most powerful of the 3. It pulls your perspective out of the heat of the moment and places it 24 hours, 1 week, 1 month into the future. Reactive minds are trapped in the present moment. They can only see what is directly in front of them, and the emotional weight of the present makes every option feel equally critical. A trained mind uses this question to simulate the future. It asks, when the dust settles, when the pressure is gone, when I look back on this moment with a clear head, what is the decision I will be proud of? That future perspective cuts through emotional noise like nothing else. 3 questions. What is actually happening? What is most important? What will I wish I had done? That is the framework. It works in a boardroom. It works in an argument. It works in a medical emergency. It works in a financial crisis. It works anywhere pressure is compressing your ability to think, because it forces expansion exactly when your brain wants to contract. Now let me show you why most people never use a framework like this. It is not because they do not know better. It is because the pressure of the moment makes them forget everything they know. This is the cruelest feature of stress. It does not just make the situation harder. It makes you worse at handling it. The knowledge is there. The skills are there. But under cortisol and adrenaline, access to that knowledge is compromised. You know what you should do. You just cannot reach it when you need it most. That is why you do not memorize this framework. You drill it. The same way a firefighter drills emergency procedures until they are automatic. The same way a pilot drills checklists until they can execute them under any level of turbulence. You practice asking these 3 questions in low-stakes situations until the sequence becomes reflexive. In traffic, when someone cuts you off, what is actually happening? Someone changed lanes aggressively. What is most important? Getting home safely. What will I wish I had done? Stayed calm and let it go. The situation is trivial, but the neural pathway you are building is not. Every time you run this sequence consciously, you are training your brain to run it automatically. And when the real crisis arrives, when the pressure is genuine and the consequences are significant, your trained mind will reach for the framework instead of reaching for the panic button. Here is the contrast. A reactive mind faces a crisis at work. A major client threatens to leave. Panic sets in. The reactive mind immediately starts problem solving from a place of fear. It offers discounts before understanding the real issue. It makes promises it cannot keep. It agrees to terms that damage the company's position. It moves fast, and the speed feels productive. But 6 months later, the short-term fix has created 3 new problems, and the relationship is worse than before. A calm mind faces the same crisis. Same client. Same threat. The cortisol rises. The pressure is real, but the calm mind runs the framework. What is actually happening? A client has expressed dissatisfaction and threatened to leave. Not left. Threatened. That distinction matters. What is most important right now? Understanding the root cause of their dissatisfaction before offering any solution. What will I wish I had done? Listened fully, responded thoughtfully, and protected the company's position while addressing their concern. From that clarity, the calm mind responds differently. It asks questions instead of making offers. It seeks information instead of providing concessions. It maintains composure, which signals to the client that the situation is under control. The outcome is better, not because the calm mind is smarter, because it made the decision from clarity instead of from panic. That distinction is everything. The quality of your decisions is directly proportional to the clarity of your mental state when you make them. Panic produces panic decisions. Calm produces calibrated decisions. The situation does not change. Your operating state changes. And that changes everything. There is one more principle you need to understand about decision-making under fire. Not every decision needs to be made immediately. Reactive minds treat every pressure moment as if the clock is at zero. But in reality, most situations allow more time than the panic suggests. The feeling of urgency is almost always louder than the actual urgency. A trained mind learns to distinguish between true time pressure and manufactured time pressure. True time pressure means lives are at risk or an irreversible deadline is seconds away. That is rare. Manufactured time pressure means your nervous system is interpreting discomfort as emergency. That is common. In most high-pressure situations, you have more time than you think. Taking that time is not hesitation. It is precision. A trained mind says, I do not need to solve this in the next 5 seconds. I need to understand it in the next 5 seconds and solve it in the next 5 minutes. That reframe alone can prevent hundreds of bad decisions over the course of a career. I am someone who makes decisions from clarity, not from pressure. That identity shifts everything. It means you stop measuring yourself by how fast you decide and start measuring yourself by how well you decide. It means you stop rewarding yourself for quick reactions and start rewarding yourself for accurate ones. Speed is not strength. Precision under pressure is strength. Your decisions define your outcomes. Your mental state defines your decisions. Protect your mental state and your decisions will protect your life. That is the equation. It is not complicated, but it requires daily discipline to maintain. In the next chapter, you will learn how to build the internal foundation that keeps this framework operational even when the pressure is extreme and sustained. One good decision under pressure is valuable. A consistent ability to make good decisions under pressure is what builds an unshakable core. That core is what we build next. Chapter 5. Build an unshakable core. Every technique you have learned so far is effective, but without an internal foundation, every technique is temporary. This chapter is about building the part of you that does not move when everything else does. Most people collect strategies. They learn to pause. They learn to breathe. They learn frameworks for better decisions. And for a while, it works. They feel more in control. They handle a few pressure moments better than they used to. But then a bigger crisis arrives. One that is more intense, more sustained, more personal than anything they practiced for. And in that moment, the techniques collapse. The pause disappears. The framework vanishes. The breathing exercise feels useless. They are right back where they started, reactive, emotional, and out of control. This happens because they built tools without building a foundation. They put up walls without pouring the concrete. And the first serious storm knocked everything down. Techniques sit on top of your psychology. A core sits underneath it. The difference is structural. Techniques give you what to do. A core gives you who to be. An unshakable core is not emotional numbness. It is not suppression. It is not pretending that nothing affects you. An unshakable core is a stable internal reference point that remains consistent regardless of external conditions. It is the part of you that knows who you are when the room is on fire and everyone is asking you to be someone else. It is the internal ground that does not shift when the ground around you is shaking. Let me explain what erodes a person's core. Because most people do not start out fragile. They become fragile through a series of small surrenders that happen so gradually they do not notice until it is too late. The first erosion is outsourced identity. This is when your sense of who you are depends entirely on external feedback. When you need praise to feel competent. When you need agreement to feel confident. When you need validation to feel stable. Every time you outsource your identity to someone else's opinion, you hand them a piece of your core. And now your stability depends on their consistency. If they approve of you today, you are solid. If they disapprove tomorrow, you crumble. That is not a core. That is a mirror reflecting whatever is in front of it. The second erosion is emotional negotiation. This is when you regularly abandon your standards to avoid discomfort. You know the right thing to do, but you negotiate yourself out of it because doing the right thing feels harder than doing the easy thing. You know you should hold the boundary, but you let it slide because the confrontation feels too uncomfortable. You know you should speak up, but you stay silent because the social cost feels too high. Every negotiation is a small crack in your foundation. One crack is nothing. 100 cracks and the structure is compromised. 1,000 cracks and you have no foundation left. The third erosion is comparison. When your internal state is dictated by how you measure against the people around you, you have no core. You have a scoreboard. And scoreboards change every time the competition changes. You feel strong when you are ahead and weak when you are behind. That is not stability. That is dependency on relative position. An unshakable core does not compare. It refers to an internal standard, not an external ranking. These three erosions, outsourced identity, emotional negotiation, and chronic comparison, are the reason most people feel solid on their good days and fragile on their bad days. Their sense of self fluctuates with their circumstances because they never build an internal reference point that is independent of those circumstances. A trained mind builds that reference point, and it builds it deliberately. The foundation of an unshakable core is non-negotiable standards. Not goals, not aspirations. Standards. Goals are things you hope to achieve. Standards are lines you refuse to cross. Goals are flexible by nature. Standards are rigid by design. A goal says, I want to stay calm under pressure. A standard says, I do not make decisions from panic. Period. Regardless of the circumstance. The goal gives you direction. The standard gives you structure. And when the pressure is severe enough, direction bends. Structure holds. You need to define what your non-negotiables are. Not what you want to do. What you refuse to stop doing. Not what you aspire to become. What you will not allow yourself to abandon. These standards must be specific. I will be a better person is not a standard. It is a wish. I do not raise my voice in disagreements regardless of what the other person does is a standard. I do not send messages when my body is in a reactive state is a standard. I do not make permanent decisions based on temporary emotions is a standard. Specific, behavioral, observable. That is what makes them enforceable. When you have clear standards, decision-making under pressure becomes radically simpler. You do not need to analyze every situation from scratch. You run it against your standards. Does this action violate who I have decided to be? If yes, I do not do it. If no, I proceed. The standard does the heavy lifting. The pressure does not change the answer because the standard was set before the pressure arrived. This is how trained minds stay consistent in inconsistent environments. They are not drawing from willpower in the moment. They are drawing from a pre-established code that has already been decided. Willpower is a limited and unreliable resource. It depletes under stress, fatigue, and emotional load. A code does not deplete. A code is a fixed reference that remains available regardless of how drained you are. Reactive people ask, what should I do right now? Trained people ask, what does my standard require right now? The first question has 1,000 possible answers, and each one is influenced by the emotional state of the moment. The second question has one answer, and it does not change based on how you feel. Now here is the part that separates the people who talk about standards from the people who actually live by them. Living by your standards is easy when the cost is low. Keeping your composure when the disagreement is minor is not a test. Holding your boundary when nothing important is at stake is not a test. The test comes when following your standard costs you something. When staying calm means the other person thinks they won. When holding the boundary means losing a relationship. When not reacting means enduring discomfort that every part of your body wants to escape. That is where the core is forged. Not in the easy moments. In the costly ones. Every time you hold your standard when it costs you something, you deposit into your core. Every time you abandon your standard because the cost felt too high, you withdraw from it. Over time, the balance of those deposits and withdrawals determines whether your core is solid or hollow. Most people have a hollow core and do not know it. They feel solid because they have never been truly tested. Their standards have never been expensive to maintain. And the first time the price goes up, they find out what they are actually made of. A trained mind does not wait for the expensive moment to discover its limits. It builds the core in advance by honoring its standards when the price is moderate, so that when the price is extreme, the pattern of adherence is already automatic. Let me show you how this plays out in practice. A reactive person sets a standard for themselves. I will not let other people's moods dictate my behavior. On a normal day, this is easy to maintain. Colleagues are pleasant, conversations are smooth, and the standard costs nothing. But then a day comes when a supervisor is aggressive, unfair, and openly hostile. The reactive person's body activates. The emotional pull is intense. The standard suddenly feels impossible. And because the core was never built through costly adherence, the standard collapses. They match the supervisor's energy. They react. They violate their own rule. And afterward, the damage is not just external. It is internal. They lost trust with the only person whose trust they cannot function without: themselves. A trained person faces the identical situation. Same aggressive supervisor. Same unfair treatment. Same emotional activation. But because this person has honored their standard dozens of times when it was moderately difficult, the pattern holds when it becomes extremely difficult. The activation is there. The pull is there. But the core is stronger than the pull. They hold the line. They do not match the energy. They stay in control. And when the situation passes, they walk away with something more valuable than relief. They walk away with self-trust. Self-trust is the product of a strong core, not self-confidence. Self-trust. Confidence is how you feel about your abilities. Trust is how much you believe you will follow through regardless of how you feel. You can be confident and still fold under pressure. But if you trust yourself, you know you will hold your position even when holding it hurts. That self-trust compounds. Every time you keep your word to yourself, the next time becomes slightly easier. Every time you honor your standard under pressure, your core gets slightly denser. Over months and years, this compounding creates a person who is fundamentally unshakable. Not because they feel nothing, because their internal reference point is stronger than any external disturbance. I am someone whose standards do not bend under pressure. Say that to yourself, not as motivation, as a declaration of operational identity. It means that your behavior is governed by your code, not by your circumstances. It means the room can be on fire and your standards still stand. It means you do not become a different person when things get hard. You become a more focused version of the same person. That is what an unshakable core looks like. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. From the outside, it looks like consistency. It looks like someone who shows up the same way whether the day is good or bad, whether the audience is watching or not, whether the stakes are low or impossibly high. That consistency is not a personality trait. It is an engineered outcome, built by hundreds of small decisions to honor a standard when it would have been easier to abandon it. You do not find your core. You build it. One kept promise at a time. One honored boundary at a time. One moment of costly adherence at a time. And when the storm comes, and the storm always comes, you will not need to search for your footing. Your footing will already be there, poured in concrete, set in place long before the wind arrived. In the next chapter, you will learn how to take the pressure that would normally crush your thinking and convert it into sharpened clarity. An unshakable core gives you stability. The next skill gives you an edge. Turning pressure into your advantage instead of your enemy is what separates people who survive a crisis from people who gain from it. Chapter 6. Turn pressure into clarity. Pressure is not your enemy. Pressure is a filter. And if you know how to use it, it will show you exactly what matters and burn away everything that does not. Most people treat pressure as something to survive. They brace against it. They clench. They hold their breath and wait for it to pass. And when it does pass, they feel relief but gain nothing. They walked through fire and came out the other side with nothing but exhaustion. That is a wasted crisis. Because pressure, when used correctly, does not just test you, it sharpens you. Here is what pressure actually does to your cognitive system when you do not resist it. It narrows your focus. Most people see this narrowing as a problem. In survival mode, it is a problem because it creates tunnel vision and eliminates creative thinking. But when your nervous system is regulated, when your core is stable and your pause is trained, that same narrowing becomes precision. It strips away the trivial. It eliminates the noise. It forces your attention onto the one or two things that genuinely matter in this moment. Pressure does not remove your ability to think. It removes your ability to think about irrelevant things. And for a trained mind, that is an advantage. Reactive minds experience pressure as chaos. Everything becomes louder, faster, and more confusing. They feel overwhelmed because their attention is being pulled in every direction simultaneously. They cannot prioritize because everything feels equally urgent. They cannot think clearly because their cognitive bandwidth is consumed by the emotional experience of the pressure itself. Trained minds experience the same pressure as a signal. Not a pleasant signal, not a comfortable one, but a useful one. The signal says, the stakes just went up, which means most of what you were paying attention to no longer matters. A trained mind uses that signal to shed unnecessary concerns and focus entirely on what is essential. Where a reactive mind sees 100 problems, a trained mind sees 2 that actually need to be solved right now. That is clarity, not the absence of pressure. Clarity produced by pressure. This reframe changes everything. When you stop running from pressure and start using it, you gain an edge that most people will never have. Because while they are busy trying to escape the discomfort, you are extracting information from it. While they are panicking about the volume of problems, you are filtering down to the ones that matter. While they are losing function, you are gaining focus. The mechanism behind this is straightforward. When your stress response activates and you do not resist it, your brain enters a state of heightened alertness. Your senses sharpen. Your reaction time increases. Your attention becomes laser-focused. This is the same state that allows a surgeon to perform a complex procedure under time pressure or a pilot to execute emergency protocols with precision. The key is that these professionals do not fight the activation. They channel it. They let the heightened state serve the task instead of derailing it. You can train the same channeling in your everyday life. The next time a deadline compresses and the pressure mounts, instead of tensing against it, ask yourself one question. What just became irrelevant? The answer will surprise you. Pressure reveals that half the things you were worrying about do not matter when the stakes are real. The minor email, the optional meeting, the cosmetic detail you were polishing. Pressure burns these away. Let them go. And put your sharpened attention on the 2 or 3 actions that will determine the actual outcome. This is not about ignoring your responsibilities. This is about triaging them under real conditions. Calm conditions allow you to spread your attention across many things. Pressure conditions demand that you concentrate your attention on few things. Both are appropriate for their context. The mistake is trying to operate in pressure conditions with a calm condition strategy. That is how people freeze. They try to hold everything at once when the moment is demanding they hold only what matters. A trained mind says, pressure is not taking something from me. Pressure is showing me where to aim. That reframe is not denial. It is strategic. It takes the same physiological experience that cripples reactive people and converts it into a targeting system. Here is the contrast at its sharpest. 2 people receive the same devastating news at work. A major project has failed. The fallout is coming. Resources are scarce and time is short. The reactive mind spirals. It fixates on blame. It replays the failure. It imagines catastrophic consequences. It tries to solve 10 problems at once and solves none of them well. Every conversation becomes tense. Every decision becomes desperate. The pressure owns them. The calm mind receives the same news. The same activation hits. The stomach drops. The tension rises. But instead of spiraling, the calm mind lets the pressure do its job. It allows the irrelevant concerns to fall away. It stops thinking about who is at fault and starts thinking about what can be salvaged. It identifies the two most important actions for the next 24 hours and ignores everything else. It moves with precision instead of panic. And when others see that precision, their own panic begins to decrease. Clarity is contagious. Just as panic spreads through a room, composure spreads through a room. That is the compounding effect of turning pressure into clarity. You do not just improve your own performance. You stabilize the people around you. You become the anchor point that others orient toward. Not because you gave a speech or issued orders. Because your clarity was visible and it gave them something steady to hold on to. I am someone who uses pressure instead of being used by it. That identity makes pressure a tool in your system instead of a threat to your system. You stop dreading high-stakes moments and start recognizing them as the moments where your training becomes most visible and most valuable. Pressure is not going away. Your career will bring more of it. Your life will bring more of it. The question is not whether pressure will come. The question is whether you will waste it or use it. Trained minds use it. Every single time. In the next chapter, you will learn how this clarity under pressure translates into leadership. When you are the person who stays clear while others spiral, people turn to you. Not because of your title, because of your composure. Leading when no one else can is the natural result of everything you have trained so far. Chapter 7. Lead when no one else can. Leadership is not a title. Leadership is what happens when pressure strips everything away and the only thing left is who you are in that moment. And in that moment, the person who stays calm leads, whether they were asked to or not. Most people think leadership requires authority. They think you need a position, a rank, a permission slip from someone above you before you can lead. That belief keeps them waiting. Waiting for the promotion, waiting for the invitation, waiting for someone to tell them it is their turn. And while they wait, the crisis arrives. The room fills with panic. And the person who steps forward is not the one with the highest title. It is the one with the steadiest mind. Crisis does not care about your job title. Crisis does not check your resume. Crisis creates a vacuum, and whoever fills that vacuum with composure becomes the leader. Not by declaration, by demonstration. This is the most honest form of leadership that exists. It cannot be faked. It cannot be borrowed. It is earned in real time by the person who can think when no one else can. Here is what happens in a group when pressure hits. Panic is contagious. It spreads through body language, vocal tone, and emotional energy faster than any rational thought. One person panics, and the people closest to them absorb that energy. Their nervous systems activate in response. Their stress hormones rise. Their thinking narrows. Within seconds, an entire room can shift from functional to paralyzed. This is called emotional contagion, and it is one of the most powerful forces in group dynamics. It does not require words. It operates below conscious awareness. People catch panic the way they catch a yawn, automatically and without permission. But here's what most people do not realize. Calm is equally contagious. When one person in a high-pressure environment maintains composure, the people around them begin to regulate. Not immediately, not dramatically, but steadily. Their nervous systems receive a competing signal. The panic says danger. The calm person says manageable. And when those two signals conflict, people gravitate toward the one that feels more controlled. They orient toward the steady voice. They watch the composed body language. They mirror the slower breathing. This is not theory. This is how the human nervous system co-regulates in group settings. Your calm does not just protect you. It stabilizes the people around you. That is why crisis leadership is not about giving orders. It is about regulating the emotional environment. The leader who panics amplifies the crisis. The leader who stays composed contains it. Before a single word is spoken, before a single decision is made, the emotional tone set by the calmest person in the room determines whether the group spirals or stabilizes. Reactive leaders rely on volume and urgency. They bark instructions. They demand speed. They project their own anxiety onto the team and call it motivation. And the team responds with frantic activity that feels productive but produces errors, miscommunication, and burnout. The crisis may get resolved eventually, but the collateral damage is significant. Trust erodes. Morale drops. People start associating that leader with chaos instead of control. Trained leaders operate differently. They lower their voice when the room gets loud. They slow their movements when everyone else accelerates. They ask clear, specific questions instead of issuing panicked commands. They create structure in the middle of disorder, not because they are performing calm, because they have built the internal system that produces calm automatically. And the team responds to that system. They feel the steadiness. They trust it. They follow it. Not because they were told to. Because in a moment of chaos, a composed presence is the most valuable thing in the room. There is a critical principle here that most people miss. In a crisis, people do not follow the person with the best plan. They follow the person they believe can handle the situation. And belief is communicated through composure, not through words. You can have the perfect strategy, but if you deliver it with a shaking voice and frantic energy, no one will trust it. You can have an imperfect strategy, but if you deliver it with calm authority and steady presence, people will execute it with confidence. Delivery matters more than content in high-pressure moments. How you say it determines whether people believe it. This is why everything you have trained in the previous chapters matters now. The pause from Chapter 2, the stillness from Chapter 3, the decision framework from Chapter 4, the unshakable core from Chapter 5, the clarity from Chapter 6. All of those skills converge in this moment. Leadership under crisis is not a separate skill. It is the natural output of a trained mind operating in a social environment. Now here is the part that changes how you see yourself. You do not need to wait for a formal leadership position to practice this. Every group you are part of is an opportunity. A tense family conversation, a stressful project meeting, a difficult exchange with a colleague. In every one of these situations, someone sets the emotional tone. If you are the most reactive person, you set a tone of chaos. If you are the most composed person, you set a tone of stability. You are already leading. The only question is in which direction. A trained mind says, my composure is not just for me. It is my contribution to every room I walk into. That reframe elevates calm from a personal skill to a leadership tool. You are no longer just managing your own nervous system. You are influencing the nervous systems of everyone around you. That influence is not manipulative. It is stabilizing. And it is one of the most valuable things you can offer in any professional or personal environment. Most people will never learn this. They will spend their careers reacting to pressure, spreading that reactivity to others, and wondering why they are never trusted with more responsibility. Reactive people get managed. Composed people get followed. That is not a corporate platitude. That is an observable pattern in every organization, every family, and every community. I am someone who leads through composure, not through volume. That identity shifts everything about how you operate in groups. You stop trying to prove yourself through visible effort and start proving yourself through visible control. You stop competing for attention and start earning trust. You stop adding noise to chaotic situations and start being the signal that cuts through it. The world does not need more people who can shout instructions during a crisis. The world needs more people who can lower their voice, steady the room, and lead with clarity when no one else can find it. That person is built, not born, and you have been building yourself into that person since Chapter 1. In the final chapter, you will learn how to make this permanent, not as a set of techniques you deploy when needed, as a core identity that operates every day, in every situation, without effort. Becoming the calm others remember is the last and most important step. Chapter 8. Become the calm they remember. There is a difference between acting calm and being calm. Everything you have learned in this audiobook so far has been building toward this final distinction. Acting calm is a performance. Being calm is an identity. One requires effort every single time. The other operates automatically because it has become part of who you are. Most people stop at the performance level. They learn the techniques. They practice the pause. They use the framework. And when the pressure arrives, they deploy these tools consciously, deliberately, with visible effort. That is progress. That is significantly better than being reactive. But it is not the final level. The final level is when calm is no longer something you do. It is something you are. This shift from behavior to identity is the most important transition in mental training. Behaviors are chosen in the moment. They require energy, attention, and willpower. Identities are not chosen in the moment. They operate before the moment. They set the default before the trigger arrives. When calm is a behavior, you have to decide to be calm every time pressure hits. When calm is an identity, you do not decide. You simply respond from what you have become. Here is how the shift happens. It does not happen through a single realization. It happens through accumulated repetition. Every time you paused when your body wanted to react, you were not just managing a moment. You were casting a vote for a new identity. Every time you held your standard when it would have been easier to abandon it, you were reinforcing who you are becoming. Every time you chose clarity over panic, composure over volume, precision over speed, you were building the architecture of a new self. And at some point, the architecture becomes the person. The training becomes the instinct. The practice becomes the default. You do not notice the exact moment it happens. There is no dramatic turning point. One day, you simply realize that a situation which would have sent you into reactive mode 6 months ago barely registers now. Not because you suppressed the feeling, because your nervous system processed it differently. The activation was smaller. The recovery was faster. The gap between stimulus and response was wider. You did not have to try to be calm. You were calm. That is the identity shift. But let me be direct about something. This identity is not permanent in the way most people want it to be. It is not a trophy you earn once and keep forever. It is more like physical fitness. You maintain it through consistent practice, or you lose it through neglect. The person who trains for 6 months and then stops will eventually return to their old default. The neural pathways you built will weaken if they are not reinforced. The standards you set will erode if they are not honored. Calm as an identity requires ongoing maintenance. Not intense maintenance, consistent maintenance. This means the small moments never stop mattering. The way you respond to a slow driver in traffic still matters. The way you handle a frustrating email still matters. The way you manage your internal dialogue on a bad day still matters. These are not trivial moments. These are the repetitions that keep your identity intact. Trained minds do not graduate from practice. They understand that practice is the point. Most people want a destination. They want to arrive at calm and stay there without further effort. That is not how the nervous system works. The nervous system adapts to what you repeat. Repeat composure, and composure becomes your default. Stop repeating it, and the old reactive patterns will fill the gap. This is not discouraging. This is freeing, because it means you are never stuck. You are never permanently broken. You are always one consistent practice away from rebuilding what you need. Now here is the part that changes how other people experience you. When calm becomes your identity, people feel it. Not because you announce it, because it radiates through every interaction. Your voice carries a different weight. Your presence creates a different atmosphere. When you walk into a tense room, the room shifts slightly. When you respond to a crisis, people listen differently. When you hold your ground without raising your voice, people remember it long after the moment has passed. That is the calm they remember, not a technique they watched you deploy, not a performance they saw you execute, a fundamental quality they felt in your presence. People forget what was said in a crisis. They forget the specific decisions that were made, but they never forget how the calmest person in the room made them feel. Safe, steady, handled. Reactive people are forgotten quickly. Their outbursts, their panic, their emotional volatility blend into the general noise of every other reactive person. But the person who stayed calm when everything was falling apart, that person occupies a permanent space in people's memory. Because that kind of composure is rare, and rare things are remembered. I am someone who does not just act calm. I am calm. That is the final identity statement, not a goal you are working toward. A description of who you are becoming through every practiced pause, every held standard, every moment of composure chosen over reaction. That identity is not given to you. It is built by you, one day at a time, one decision at a time, one controlled response at a time. You do not just act calm. You become calm. And when you become calm, you become the person that everyone remembers when the room was on fire and one person did not burn. You have reached the end of this audiobook, but the work has not ended. The work is just beginning. Let me remind you of what you now carry. In Chapter 1, you learned that panic is a system response. not a character flaw. In Chapter 2, you learn to rewire your default through recognition, interruption, and redirection. In Chapter 3, you learn that stillness under pressure is the highest form of control. In Chapter 4, you learned 3 questions that produce clarity when pressure compresses your thinking. In Chapter 5, you built an unshakable core through non-negotiable standards. In Chapter 6, you learned to turn pressure into a filter that reveals what matters. In Chapter 7, you learned that crisis leadership begins with composure, not authority. In Chapter 8, you learned to shift calm from a performance into a permanent identity. These are not 8 separate ideas. They are one system. Each principle strengthens the others. Remove one, and the system weakens. Practice all of them, and the system becomes unbreakable. Do not try to apply everything at once. Choose one principle, the one that speaks to the problem you face most often right now. Practice it daily. Let it become familiar. Then add the next one. When the pressure comes, remember 3 words. Pause. Breathe. Choose. Pause to create the gap. Breathe to regulate your nervous system. Choose to engage your thinking brain instead of your survival brain. 3 words. 3 seconds. A completely different outcome. You do not win by waiting for perfect conditions. You win by becoming the kind of person who stays in control in imperfect ones. Train your mind, and you will be ready for every situation. The training does not end here. Tomorrow the world will test you again. There will be moments where the old reactive pattern tries to reassert itself. Those moments are not failures. They are the training ground. Every day gives you another repetition that strengthens your system. There will be bad days. Days when you slip. Do not use those days as evidence that the training does not work. Use them as reminders of why the training must continue. A bad day does not define your identity. What you do the day after a bad day defines it. The reward for this work is not applause. Most people will never see the hundreds of small moments where you chose control over reaction. They will not know about the internal battles you won in silence. The reward is not recognition. The reward is stability. The reward is self-trust. The reward is walking through chaos and knowing, with absolute certainty, that you will not be controlled by it. That is what calm minds carry, not the absence of storms, the ability to stand inside them without breaking. You are now equipped. Go train.